Greetings, scholars. We're moving forward into debate, and so I want to take a moment and talk about refutation. What is refutation? Refutation is a framework to provide clash. It literally is the process of attacking arguments of an opponent in order to weaken or destroy those. Now, there's a formula that we follow for refutation. You ought to know that. The formula first identifies the argument you're trying to refute. Second, you state your position or make your claim. Third, you offer support for your position. And fourth, you conclude by relating it to the overall issue. Get used to following this formula. Actually, if you watch other arguers engage in this all the time, they tell you what argument they're refuting, what their point is, they support their point, and then they say, and if we are true on this point, here's the significance of it. We want to do more than that. We want to look for the different tactics you can use in refutation, so we call these the topoi of refutation. I'm going to list some of these. There are probably a lot more. The first of these is inconsistent arguments. This is the presence of an inconsistency in the arguer itself. We're familiar with this with the idea of flip-flopping. This is used in politics where they say that the advocate has agreed for one thing in the past and then a different thing in the future. So anytime an advocate says, you said one thing and then you said the exact opposite, they're using this tactic of refutation, inconsistent arguments. Another example of this, another example of argument is the minimization of impacts or the minimization of significance. Sometimes people will make an argument and instead of responding and saying that's not true, they'll say, well, that's just not an important point. This is minimizations. This is a common tactic used in refutation. You might think about using that in your debates. On the other hand, maximization of your points is another tactic in which someone says, yeah, you have some points, but they're not as important as the points that we have. The position that we are stating is much more significant. Again, a tactic of refutation that can be followed in that. Minimization, maximization. You can also try to reduce to absurdity. We talked about this as one strategy when we were talking about fallacies. This takes a point an opponent makes and tries to extend it to its logical conclusion in order to say that it's absurd. It's not the same as slippery slope. It's trying to apply the logic a candidate uses and try and making it more and more absurd for things. It's another tactic of refutation. An additional tactic of refutation is to deny inherency. When we use the term inherency, we're talking about the relationship of the problem to the present system. So denying inherency means to say you have a problem, but it's not actually related to the cause that you think it is. There's a problem here, but it's not related to the things that we are talking about. This is another tactic of refutation. Another tactic is to say the arguments are irrelevant. So to actually say you've made a couple of good points, but these are not points that are related to the overall significance of the issue that we are discussing. Again, these tactics of refutation have to do with breaking down the opponent's argument and trying to relate them to the overall significance. Another tactic that's commonly used is to establish dilemmas. This is a little bit more advanced strategy. This is when you say to your opposition, well, if you hold that advocacy, you have only two options, and those two options have bad choices between them. So this idea of establishing dilemmas is when you say there are only two alternatives and both of them are undesirable. If you can establish a dilemma, it puts the arguer in a very, very difficult position. So this is a very, very useful tactic. Another tactic of refutation is to turn the tables. Turning the tables, or the sometimes called the turnaround, is a strategy in which you admit the validity of part of the argument and claim that it actually supports your point. So this is an example. It's a little bit of an advanced tactic. You might think back to the presidential debates. One of the points that Hillary Clinton was trying to make when she was debating Donald Trump in the presidential debates was that Trump was a crook, that he had done numerous business practices that were problematic, and that his real estate deals were unethical in themselves. His response to that was not to try and deny the claim. He didn't say, no, these were ethical actions. He didn't say that I abide by everything. Instead, he said, I did those because they were legal and you were the lawmaker. So everything that I did was a consequence of your actions. Again, the turnaround, he admitted the validity of part of her argument, but then turned it around so that it actually was an indict against her. Very powerful in the recent presidential election. You can see this strategy used all the time. Another tactic of refutation is to assess the possibilities, to try and weigh the impacts, to say that one impact is more significant or greater than the other. This can happen by comparing the magnitude. In other words, one problem is larger than the other. You can do it through assessing the time frame. One problem is going to happen before we have another, or you could do it assessing probability. One is more likely to happen than the other. These are all options that can be used in the topoi of refutation. These different tactics, they're ones that can assist you in the debate, and they're often used by advocates when there's direct refutation involved. So think about how you're going to use refutation, and if you're going to use any of these tactics in your debate. Good luck.